The Dragon Emperor had ruled for nearly 3 centuries, and in all that time he had never been questioned. From his obsidian throne carved into the heart of Mount Valor, he governed an empire of flame and iron. Cities paid tribute in gold and livestock. Armies marched beneath banners bearing his sigil. A crowned dragon wreathed in fire. His word ended wars. His temper ignited them. Even other ancient dragons bowed their heads when he unfurled his vast wings across the imperial court. Strength defined his reign. Power sustained it. And weakness was not tolerated, which was why the hatchling had been hidden. The young dragon, born during the last winter cycle, should have been a symbol of continuity. The emperor had sired few offspring. Each one carried political weight and expectation. When the egg cracked open inside the royal incubation chamber, scholars and generals gathered to witness destiny unfold. Instead, they saw imperfection. The hatchling scales were a deep royal bronze, strong lineage, unmistakable heritage. Its eyes burned bright with intelligence. But when it attempted to stand for the first time, its right foreleg failed to support its weight. The limb bent at an unnatural angle, thinner than the others, trembling beneath even minimal pressure. Silence had fallen over the chamber. The emperor himself had stepped forward, his massive shadow swallowing the torchlight. He studied the hatchling without expression. The young dragon tried again to rise, collapsed, then released a frustrated cry that echoed painfully off stone walls. "He will not survive the training cycles," one advisor had murmured carefully. "A crippled heir invites instability," another warned. The emperor said nothing for a long time. Finally, he turned away. "Remove him from the public chambers," he ordered coldly. "Ensure he does not suffer unnecessarily." It was not quite a death sentence, but it was close. The hatchling, officially unnamed, was relocated to a secluded wing of the Imperial Mountain. Not a dungeon, not neglect. He was fed, monitored, sheltered from harsh elements. Yet he was not introduced to court, not presented to generals, not acknowledged as bloodline continuation. He existed in quiet obscurity. Months passed. The emperor did not visit. He told himself it was mercy. A ruler could not afford attachment to fragility. The empire was vast. Enemies watched constantly. A visibly weakened heir would invite rebellion. And yet, reports filtered back regardless. The hatchling refuses assisted restraints. He attempts to stand repeatedly. He has damaged 2 support braces by rejecting them. Each update was delivered without emotion, but the repetition unsettled something deep within the emperor's ancient heart. One evening, disguised beneath a cloaked projection spell, a technique allowing him to observe unseen, the emperor descended into the lower wing where the hatchling resided. The chamber surprised him. It was warmer than necessary, not from excessive flame, but from carefully placed heating stones arranged in a semicircle. Soft layered fabrics lined the floor rather than bare rock. The air carried the faint scent of herbs used for muscle relief. And there, kneeling beside the young dragon, was a human. She wore a simple servant's uniform, dark apron, sleeves rolled past her elbows. A tray of empty dishes rested nearby. She was not armored, not guarded, not afraid. The hatchling lay partially on his side, breathing unevenly after what appeared to be another failed attempt at standing. "You're pushing too hard again," the human said gently. Her voice was steady, not commanding, not pitying. The emperor froze in shadow. Humans were permitted within the mountain only in controlled roles: scribes, cooks, attendants. They did not touch royal blood. Yet this one was pressing warm cloth against the weakened foreleg, adjusting the angle carefully, supporting the joint without forcing it straight. The hatchling growled faintly in frustration. "I know," she murmured. "You hate falling." The emperor's eyes narrowed. The human continued, unfazed by the low rumble vibrating through the chamber. "You don't have to stand like the others," she said quietly. "You just have to stand your way." The hatchling attempted to pull his leg free, irritated. She didn't restrain him harshly. She shifted position, bracing her shoulder beneath his chest and guiding his weight slowly. not lifting but stabilizing. "Try again," she encouraged. The emperor expected another collapse. Instead, the hatchling rose halfway. His injured limb trembled violently, but the human adjusted her stance with surprising strength, redistributing pressure. "Hold," she whispered. 3 heartbeats passed. The hatchling remained upright, not perfectly balanced, not stable, but standing. A raw, disbelieving sound escaped his throat, half growl, half startled breath. The emperor felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. The human laughed softly, not mockingly, but with genuine pride. "There you go," she said. "See? Not broken. Not broken." The words struck harder than any battlefield insult. The emperor stepped deeper into shadow, observing closely. The hatchling's wings extended slightly for balance. His breathing steadied. He glanced down at his foreleg as if seeing it differently, not as failure but as challenge. The human slowly withdrew some support. He swayed, adjusted, remained standing. A full 10 heartbeats. Then exhaustion overtook him and he settled back onto the padded floor with a heavy exhale. Instead of disappointment, the human reached forward and scratched lightly beneath his jaw ridge. "That's progress," she said firmly. "Tomorrow we aim for 12. The hatchling released a softer rumble this time. Less frustration, more reluctant acceptance. The emperor had witnessed countless training sessions over centuries. He had seen elite instructors break stubborn dragons into obedience within days. He had seen generals mold raw aggression into unstoppable weapons. But he had never seen patience used like this. No dominance, no command magic, no force, just belief. The human began preparing a fresh brace. Not rigid iron, but layered leather reinforced with flexible support bands. She measured carefully, adjusting for muscle strain rather than appearance. "You're not meant for war charges," she muttered thoughtfully. "But maybe you're meant for something else." The emperor's mind sharpened. Something else? He stepped silently from the shadows, allowing the illusion spell to dissolve. The chamber temperature spiked instantly as his true presence filled the space. The human stiffened but did not scream. She turned slowly, then bowed deeply. "My emperor." The hatchling lifted his head, eyes widening. Not in fear, but recognition. The emperor studied them both in heavy silence. "You touch royal blood," he said evenly. "Yes," the human replied, still bowed. "You speak to him as equal." A pause. "I speak to him as someone who deserves to be heard." The chamber grew very still. The emperor's gaze shifted to the hatchling. For the first time since the day of his birth, father and son held direct eye contact without witnesses. The injured foreleg trembled slightly, but did not collapse. And for reasons the emperor could not yet name, something long calcified within his ancient, unyielding heart began quietly to fracture. The silence stretched long enough to suffocate lesser beings. The dragon emperor's wings remained folded, but tension coiled through every scale like restrained lightning. Heat radiated from him in slow, oppressive waves, turning the air heavy and difficult to breathe. The human servant remained bowed, though her hands rested protectively near the hatchling's side. Not shielding him, but steadying him. The young dragon did not lower his gaze. That alone would have shocked the court. Most dragons, even grown commanders, instinctively dipped their heads beneath the emperor's stare. Yet this hatchling, barely through his first growth cycle, held eye contact despite exhaustion. His injured foreleg trembled, but he did not retreat. "Why are you here?" the emperor asked at last, his voice low and controlled. The question was directed at the human. She straightened slowly, though she kept her posture respectful. "I serve in the lower kitchens, Your Majesty. I was assigned food delivery to this wing." "That does not explain why you remain." Her jaw tightened briefly, but her voice did not shake. "Because no one else does." The words hung dangerously in the chamber. Behind her, the hatchling shifted, his wings rustling faintly against the padded floor. The emperor's golden eyes flicked to the custom brace resting beside her. It was not imperial design. It lacked the rigid precision of military craftsmanship. Instead, it was adaptive, built for movement rather than appearance. You altered his supports, he observed. Yes. Without permission. Yes. The Emperor stepped closer. Stone beneath his claws cracked faintly under pressure. You presume authority over my bloodline? The human inhaled slowly. No, Majesty. I presume responsibility for someone who keeps trying. The hatchling let out a soft rumble, agreement. The Emperor ignored the sound, though it registered sharply. Do you know, he continued, what happens when a ruler shows weakness? Yes. Her answer came too quickly. That intrigued him. And what is that? He pressed. Enemies test boundaries. Allies reconsider loyalty. Rivals sharpen ambitions. The Emperor studied her face carefully. You are educated beyond kitchen duties. I listen, she replied simply. A faint spark of reluctant respect flickered within him. He turned his attention fully to the hatchling. Stand. It was not a suggestion. The young dragon stiffened. The human instinctively reached toward him, then stopped herself. The hatchling shifted weight forward. His strong foreleg anchored firmly. His wings extended slightly for balance. Slowly, painfully, he pushed upward. The injured limb quivered violently. For a moment, it seemed certain he would collapse. The Emperor did not move to help. He watched with unyielding scrutiny. The hatchling adjusted his stance, angling his body slightly sideways, redistributing weight through his shoulder instead of forcing direct pressure through the weakened joint. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. That was not standard form. It was adaptation. The hatchling rose fully upright, unstable, shaking, but standing. The human did not speak. She did not rush forward. She simply met the hatchling's eyes and nodded once. 5 heartbeats passed. 7. 9. The Emperor stepped closer until his shadow covered the young dragon completely. Again, he commanded. The hatchling's breathing grew heavier. Sweat dampened the edges of his scales. Still, he shifted position and attempted a controlled step forward. The injured foreleg bent, but held. It was not graceful. It was not strong. But it was deliberate. The Emperor felt something tighten deep within his chest again. Not pride, he refused that word. Recognition. This was not fragility. This was will. The hatchling managed 3 uneven steps before exhaustion forced him down. He landed roughly, but not in defeat. He immediately tried to rise again. The Emperor lifted one massive claw. Enough! The word reverberated through stone. The hatchling froze. For a long moment, the Emperor simply observed the small, trembling form before him. He remembered the day of the hatching chamber, the advisor's murmurs, the quiet calculation of political risk. Had he mistaken difference for deficiency? He turned toward the human. What is your name? She hesitated only briefly. Alara, Majesty. Alara, he repeated slowly, testing the sound. The hatchling's tail flicked faintly at the name. You defied protocol, the Emperor continued. You altered imperial medical design. You assumed personal discretion over royal offspring. Yes, you could be executed. She swallowed but did not step back. Yes. Why continue? Her answer came softer this time. Because he doesn't see himself as broken unless everyone else does. The chamber grew quiet again. The Emperor lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in closer examination of the hatchling. The young dragon watched him carefully, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. The Emperor had extinguished that look before. On battlefields, in conquered rulers, in rival heirs. He had always believed hope without strength was liability. Yet here stood a creature who possessed strength precisely because hope had not been removed. The Emperor straightened to full height. From this day forward, he declared, voice carrying unmistakable authority. The hatchling will no longer be hidden. Alara's breath caught. The hatchling's wings flared slightly in surprise. He will train, the Emperor continued, but not by traditional command structure. His program will be revised. The word felt foreign in his mouth. He turned toward Alara. You will assist under supervision of imperial strategists. Shock crossed her face. Majesty, you understand adaptation. You observe rather than dominate. That has merit. She bowed deeply again, emotion tightening her voice. I will not fail him. The emperor's gaze hardened slightly. You will not fail the empire. Yes, Majesty. He stepped toward the exit of the chamber, then paused. Without turning back, he spoke one final sentence. If he falls again, he rises. It was not a question. It was law. The hatchling released a low, determined rumble. Alara placed her hand gently against his shoulder ridge. Not restraining, not guiding, just present. For the first time since his birth, the crippled hatchling was no longer hidden in shadow. And for the first time in centuries, the Dragon Emperor had altered a decision not because of strategy, but because of compassion. Neither of them yet understood how deeply that choice would reshape the empire. But the mountain itself seemed to breathe differently that night, as though something ancient and unyielding had shifted and chosen to grow. News spread through the Imperial Mountain faster than wildfire through dry timber. The hidden hatchling had been acknowledged. Worse, he was being trained. Not quietly, not discreetly, publicly. When the young dragon entered the lower training arena for the first time, accompanied by Imperial guards and followed at a measured distance by Alara, conversation rippled across the stone terraces. Veteran commanders watched with narrowed eyes. Noble dragons observed from elevated perches carved into the arena walls. Apprentices paused mid-drill, curiosity outweighing discipline. At the center of it all stood the Dragon Emperor, silent and immovable. The hatchling hesitated at the arena threshold. The training ground was vast, layered with reinforced stone platforms, elevation ridges, and weighted obstacles designed to strengthen wings, claws, and endurance. Every dragon raised within the empire had proven themselves here. Many had bled here. Alara leaned slightly toward the hatchling's shoulder. Remember, she murmured quietly, you don't have to move like them. He exhaled slowly, then stepped forward. A murmur followed the uneven rhythm of his gait. Not mocking, not yet, but doubtful. The emperor lifted one massive claw, and silence snapped into place. Demonstration, he commanded. A senior battle instructor descended into the arena. His scales bore scars from decades of combat. His wings were broad, movements precise and economical. He bowed deeply before the emperor, then turned toward the hatchling with measured neutrality. You will cross the central ridge, the instructor announced. Ascend the incline. Hold position at the summit for 20 heartbeats. A basic endurance drill. For most, it was simple. For this hatchling, the incline alone was brutal. The slope rose sharply, forcing heavy weight distribution onto forelimbs. Loose gravel had been intentionally scattered to test balance under unstable conditions. The hatchling began his approach. The first steps were steady. Then the incline steepened. His injured foreleg buckled slightly, but he angled his body sideways, placing more strain through his shoulder and wing joint rather than directly downward. A whisper passed through the terraces. That is inefficient. He will exhaust himself. Alara remained still at the arena edge, fingers tightly clasped. The hatchling continued climbing. Halfway up, gravel shifted beneath his weight. His hind leg slipped. He lurched sideways. Gasps echoed. He did not fall. He flared one wing sharply against the slope, using friction to stabilize. Not elegant, but effective. The emperor's eyes narrowed, studying every adjustment. This was not traditional combat form. This was improvisation. The hatchling reached the summit ridge. His breathing was heavy now. Muscles trembled visibly. Hold, the instructor called. 1 heartbeat. 3, 5. The wind at the summit was harsher, pushing against his unbalanced stance. His injured limb shook violently, nearly collapsing twice. Alara whispered under her breath, though no one heard her words. At 12 heartbeats, the hatchling's leg gave out. He dropped to one knee. A wave of disappointment rippled outward. The instructor opened his mouth to declare failure, but the hatchling did not descend. He shifted. Instead of forcing the weakened limb upright again, he lowered his body deliberately, bracing both wings flat against the stone. He redistributed weight across his chest and hindquarters, maintaining vertical presence even without full leg support. The position was unconventional. Not taut, not standard, but he remained at summit height. "Continue counting," the Emperor said evenly. The instructor blinked, then obeyed. 15 heartbeats. 10. 20. "Complete," the instructor announced reluctantly. Silence followed. The hatchling slowly pushed himself upright again, using the ridge's slight ledge to assist leverage. The descent was uneven but controlled. When he reached the arena floor, he did not look at the watching nobles. He looked only at the Emperor. The Emperor held his gaze. Something subtle shifted in the watching crowd. Not admiration, not yet, but recalculation. The next trial was aerial balance. A murmur of skepticism returned immediately. Flight required symmetrical wing control and stable forelimb launch. The instructor stepped back. "You may withdraw," he offered, not unkindly. The hatchling's jaw tightened. Alara stepped forward slightly. "May he modify the launch point?" she asked respectfully. Several nobles bristled at her audacity to speak. The Emperor did not. "Explain," he commanded. "He cannot generate equal thrust from a flat start," Alara said calmly. "But if he begins from elevated stone, he can compensate with glide momentum rather than explosive lift." The arena fell silent again. The Emperor considered, then nodded once. Approved. A movable stone platform was repositioned at mid-height. The hatchling climbed carefully. His breathing was still heavy from the incline trial. Fatigue trembled beneath his scales. Alara met his eyes. "Not power," she said softly. "Precision." He stepped to the edge, spread his wings, jumped. For a terrifying moment, it seemed certain he would spiral. His injured foreleg tucked tightly against his chest, altering airflow. His wings angled asymmetrically but deliberately. Instead of attempting a high climb, he entered a controlled glide pattern, banking wide across the arena. Wind caught beneath his wings. Stability returned. He circled once, twice. The landing was rough. He stumbled upon impact, but remained upright. The terraces were utterly silent. The Emperor rose slowly to his full height. "This empire," he declared, voice echoing across the arena walls, "has long valued uniform strength." His gaze swept across nobles and commanders alike. "But war evolves." The words struck deeper than many realized. "Adaptation," he continued, "is not weakness." He looked directly at the hatchling. "It is survival." The young dragon stood taller despite visible exhaustion. In that moment, perception shifted. Not completely, but undeniably. Later, as the arena emptied and dusk light filtered through high stone arches, the Emperor approached Alara privately. "You risk much," he said. She bowed. "So does he." The Emperor studied the training ground where his hatchling now rested under guard supervision, chest rising and falling in deep, hard-earned breaths. "For centuries," the Emperor murmured quietly, almost to himself, "I believed control preserved legacy." Alara did not answer. She did not need to. The Emperor's gaze remained fixed on his son. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "legacy is not forged through perfection." The hatchling stirred slightly, even in sleep, injured foreleg twitching faintly. The Emperor turned away, but not before something softened in his ancient expression. The Empire had begun to watch, and for the first time they were not witnessing the shaping of a weapon. They were witnessing the emergence of something far rarer. Resilience without cruelty, strength without domination, and a ruler beginning to understand that fate could be altered not by fire, but by belief. The challenge came at dawn. It did not arrive with ceremony, nor with warning banners rising along the horizon. It came as a tremor beneath stone, deep, violent, unmistakable. The outer watchtowers sounded their alarm horns in sharp succession. From the northern ridge, smoke spiraled upward where border outposts once stood. An enemy war host had crossed into Imperial territory. Not raiders, not scouts, an organized strike force. The Dragon Emperor stood at the highest balcony of Mount Valor, wind tearing at his massive wings as reports flooded in. They advance through the basalt valleys. Siege constructs accompany them, winged artillery forming flanking arcs. It was a calculated attack, swift, precise, designed to test response speed and internal stability. And somewhere beyond the ridgelines, rival factions waited to see if the Emperor's rumored weakened heir had compromised the Empire. The Emperor's gaze hardened. "Mobilize primary battalions," he ordered. "Seal civilian corridors. Prepare aerial defense." Behind him, the hatchling, no longer hidden, no longer nameless in the minds of the court, stood with visible tension rippling beneath bronze scales. He had trained for months now, adapted, strengthened, not into conventional symmetry, but into something uniquely effective. Yet this was no arena. This was war. Alara stood nearby, silent but alert. The Emperor turned toward his son. "You remain within the mountain." The hatchling's head snapped upward. Every instinct within him rejected the command. He stepped forward despite the tremor in his injured limb. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "This is not demonstration. This is annihilation." The hatchling lowered his body slightly, not in submission but in preparation. He would not remain hidden again. Before tension could escalate, another explosion thundered across the valley. A section of outer wall cracked beneath heavy impact. The Emperor's attention shifted instantly, and in that fraction of distraction the hatchling moved. Not recklessly, strategically. He sprinted not toward open battlefield, but toward the elevated ridge platforms overlooking the narrow basalt pass. Alara followed. The Emperor noticed too late. Rage flared, then paused. The basalt pass, a narrow corridor between towering volcanic rock columns. Too tight for large battalions to maneuver effectively. Too confined for full wing deployment. The hatchling reached the ridge first. Enemy constructs, massive armored beasts driven by war mages, forced their way through the pass. Their design relied on frontal durability and symmetrical advance formation. Standard aerial assault would struggle within such confined geometry. The hatchling positioned himself at an uneven ledge above the corridor. Alara reached his side, breathing hard. "Precision," she reminded him softly. Below, the first construct raised its head, scanning for threats. The hatchling launched, not upward into open sky, but sideways. He angled his body between rock faces, using confined wind tunnels to generate controlled glide bursts. His injured foreleg remained tucked tight, minimizing drag. Instead of direct collision, he banked sharply, releasing concentrated flame downward at structural joints where armor plates overlapped. Not brute force, targeted vulnerability. The first construct staggered. He pivoted midair using asymmetric wing adjustments, something traditional training would have labeled flawed, and looped through the narrow gap again, striking a secondary hinge. Metal shrieked. The construct collapsed sideways, blocking the pass. Enemy formations behind it faltered. From the mountain balcony, the Emperor watched in stunned stillness. The hatchling was not overpowering the enemy. He was destabilizing them, using terrain, using limitation, using adaptation. More constructs advanced, attempting to widen the corridor by blasting rock walls. The hatchling shifted tactics immediately. He landed atop a jagged column and hammered loose weakened stone with rapid, focused flame bursts, not to destroy enemies directly, but to trigger controlled rock slides. Massive basalt chunks crashed down, sealing portions of the pass and isolating enemy units. Imperial aerial forces, now regrouped above, capitalized instantly. What would have been a prolonged siege turned into segmented containment. Within an hour, the invading force retreated. Not because they were overwhelmed by strength, but because their strategy had been dismantled. When silence finally returned to the valleys, smoke drifted upward in thin, defeated spirals. The hatchling landed heavily atop the ridge. His muscles trembled violently. The injured foreleg nearly collapsed from overuse. Alara rushed forward, steadying him. "You did not charge," she whispered, almost in awe. He released a low, exhausted rumble. Below, Imperial soldiers began clearing debris and securing the perimeter. The Dragon Emperor descended from the mountain heights with thunderous wing beats. He landed before his son. For a long moment, neither spoke. Wind carried ash between them. "You disobeyed," the Emperor said finally. The hatchling held his gaze. Not defiant. Certain. "Yes," the Emperor continued slowly. "You did." He stepped closer. "You did not fight as Empire tradition dictates." The hatchling remained still. "You fought," the Emperor said, voice lowering. "As yourself." Silence stretched between them. Then, before assembled generals, soldiers, and nobles gathering below, the Dragon Emperor did something unseen in 3 centuries of rule. He lowered his head. Not fully, not submissively, but in acknowledgement. "You are not forged in my image," he declared. "You are forged in your own." The words carried across stone terraces, through the mountain corridors, into the heart of the Empire. The hatchling straightened despite exhaustion. Alara stepped back, eyes bright but silent. The Emperor turned to face his gathered commanders. "Strength," he announced, voice resonating like distant thunder, "is not uniformity." He looked toward the basalt pass where broken constructs lay trapped beneath fallen stone. "It is the ability to endure, to adapt, to rise differently." No one argued, no one doubted, because the battlefield itself bore witness. The Emperor's gaze returned to his son. No longer hidden heir, no longer whispered liability, but something far more powerful. A symbol, not of flawless dominance, but of transformation. As dusk settled over Mount Valor, the mountain did not feel as it once had. Its walls no longer guarded secrecy. They sheltered evolution. And at the Emperor's side stood not a reflection of ancient rigidity, but proof that fate, once thought unchangeable, could be reshaped. Not through fear, not through suppression, but through the quiet, persistent belief of one human who refused to see brokenness, and one hatchling who refused to remain unseen. The Empire would remember that day, not as the moment an invasion failed, but as the moment its future truly began.